And good morning, everybody. This is Art Shed with the show. Let's be reasonable, folks. We're looking at a Washington Post article, and of course, we're going to do something a little different today. We're going to let the reader read the story to us, and we'll comment while the story is running because there's probably a lot of information that American people would like to know and would like to kind of tea leaf put together, right? This story again from the Washington Post. It's about lawmakers expensing millions in 2023 under a new program that doesn't require receipts. Isn't that special? Can't get in trouble for doing anything wrong if it doesn't require you to keep any receipts, right? So that's very interesting. So let's read the story or hear the story and let's talk about it on the other side. Hang on.
This news story was written by Jacqueline Alemany, Clara Ence Morse, and Liz Goodwin. Lawmakers expense millions in 2023 under new program that doesn't require receipts. Critics say the program's lack of transparency and record keeping opens it up to abuse. Matt Gaetz was the program's top spender. More than 300 House lawmakers were reimbursed at least $5.2 million for food and lodging while on official business in Washington last year under a new, taxpayer-funded program that does not require them to provide receipts. The program, which kicked off last year after a House panel passed it with bipartisan support, was intended to make it easier for lawmakers to cover the cost of maintaining separate homes in D.C. and their home districts. But critics argue that its reliance on the honor system and lack of transparent record keeping makes it ripe for abuse. The reimbursement scheme's lack of receipt requirements is a ridiculous loophole, said Craig Holman, a lobbyist for the good government group Public Citizen. Clearly, it becomes very difficult to tell whether or not it's a legitimate payment and whether it's proper, Holman added. The program has only a few strict rules. Lawmakers cannot be repaid for principal or interest on their mortgages. They can only get reimbursement for days they're actually working or flying to D.C., and they can't ask for more back than their actual expenses. They're also subject to daily spending caps determined by the General Services Administration. Members are strongly encouraged, but not required, to keep records of their expenses, according to guidance issued by the House Committee on Administration. The same rules apply to every member. But lawmakers' reimbursements requests have varied widely, and because the program doesn't require receipts or detailed public disclosure of what members are expensing, taxpayers have to take lawmakers' word that they're playing by the rules. Of the 435 voting members of the House, 319 members, 153 Democrats, and 166 Republicans, received reimbursement for some food or lodging expenses last year, alongside 3 delegates from U.S. territories.
Okay, so there's a lot, and I have the reader up on like 1.25, so we can just blow right through this, right? But okay, so here's some of the highlights so far. It's a bipartisan supported bill that passed. Obviously, was signed off on by the president, right? Because it needed to be signed off on. It is a honor system program, right? So it doesn't necessarily say that you got to do it, but it would be honorable thing for you to do if you were to keep the records. So there's that, right? Okay. Lack of receipts, no receipts needed, right? You can only get deducted, or you can only get reimbursed for or no, you cannot get reimbursed for principal and interest, and you cannot be reimbursed for um, any expenses over the limit, right? So, uh, strongly encourage that you keep records. However, not required that you do so. Past 319 members signed off on this bill. Keep in mind that the House majority last year was 219, or no, I think it was 222 to 213. I think it was 213. So there were at least some 70 to maybe 90 Democrats that also jumped on this bill as well. So a lot going on. Let's hear more.
The other 116 members received no money from the reimbursement program, according to a Washington Post review of the first 11 months of data released by the House. Representative Matt Gaetz, Republican Florida, the program's overall top spender, was reimbursed for nearly $30,000 in lodging expenses and more than $10,000 for food in 2023. He was reimbursed for more than $4,000 for lodging in 2 different months and more than $3,000 in 5 different months. A spokesperson for Gaetz said he was reimbursed for lodging expenses on days when the House was out of session. But Gaetz remained in Washington on official business for depositions related to his post on the Select Committee on Weaponization of the Federal Government.
So you mean to tell me Matt Gaetz was the only person that was working when Congress wasn't in session? I find that to be interesting. I find that to be extremely interesting.
Representative Gates has always complied with House rules regarding congressional reimbursements, a spokesperson for Gates emailed in a statement. In 2023, Representative Gates dedicated significant time to his work on the Weaponization Subcommittee, requiring his presence to be in Washington, D.C.
When they say he represent or actually committed considerable amounts of time, obviously there's no records to show what that considerable amount of time is and its relevance because, again, this program doesn't require that you keep any records. So interesting.
On days often when there were no votes, which incurred additional reimbursement expenses to conduct depositions. Other members of the Weaponization Committee expensed significantly less than Gates. Some members of Congress who own homes in the Washington area, including Representatives Patrick T. McHenry, Republican North Carolina, Ro Khanna, Democrat California, and Mike McCall, Republican Texas, have chosen not to participate in the program at all. Representative Jim Banks, Republican Indiana, who owns a $1 million home in Virginia, was reimbursed less than $1,500 each month. But other
Okay, so I'm going to say bravo to these individuals, Representative Patrick Henry McHenry, the little guy. Remember the little guy with the bow tie? Ro Khanna from California, Mike McCall from Texas. Bravo for not taking this money because you shouldn't be taking this money. And I say you shouldn't be taking this money because you already get a salary. I think you're getting, got to remember, not only, got to remember, Congress gets, I mean, each member of Congress gets about $175,000, right? And then on top of that, they get a congressional budget. And I think the congressional budget number is now upwards of $1 million or better that they get in order to run their office. In other words, that's money they get to dip into as well. Reimbursable receipts got to show records here, right? So you're showing records there. As long as you're showing records, you're okay. So not only do they get a salary, but they got a dispensable pool of money that they get to in order to run their office. So they get money there too. And for some strange reason, now we have another fund for them to tap into, of which, right, I guess last year, since its inception in 2022, they took about $5.2 million. Okay, so I'll let this guy continue.
D.C. area homeowners, including Representatives Nancy Mace, Republican South Carolina, and Eric Swalwell, Democrat California, requested significantly higher reimbursements than banks did for some months of 2023. Mace, who co-owns a $1,649,000 Capitol Hill townhouse she purchased in 2021 with her then fiancé, Patrick Bryant, expensed a total of $19,395 over the 9-month period ending on September 30th, 2023, an average of more than $2,000 a month. She expensed over $3,000 for lodging in January, March, and May. Swalwell, who purchased a $1,215,000 home in the Eckington neighborhood of Washington, was reimbursed nearly $19,000 for lodging expenses over 11 months in 2023. In May of that year, he received $2,838 in lodging reimbursement. As homeowners, Mace and Swalwell aren't allowed to ask taxpayers to cover their mortgage payments and can only expense taxes, insurance, maintenance, utilities, and other ancillary costs. There's nothing average about having 3 children and a wife who are trying to live between 2 expensive areas.
Let me tell you, there's nothing average about this expense account that Congress is receiving in order to really, I think, just pull another one over the American people. Right? And you'll get the American people jumping up and down about sending aid to Ukraine or helping out migrants or whatever else. But, you know, this is something else that they should be jumping up and down about because, hey, if you're looking at the money, most of the money that floats around in this country floats around in the upper 20%. It's not on the lower 80%. So here's another example of hypocrisy at its finest so far.
Swalwell spokeswoman Cassie Ballou said in a statement, "The congressman's expenses reflect the actual cost of working in D.C. and are signed off by House administration." Swalwell owed about $1,144 per month in taxes and insurance alone, according to figures provided by his spokeswoman, and incurred other home maintenance costs she declined to specify. Every month is different as to what maintenance costs Representative Swalwell is reimbursed for, she added. Everything he does is allowable. Mace was told by people involved with her office finances.
Of course, it's allowable. Why would you write a bill that favored you that wouldn't make it allowable? Why would you set yourself up to be labeled as corrupt Oh, well, wait a minute. The label is probably there nonetheless, right? But why would you set yourself up to be criminally charged? They're not going to do that. That's why this particular program looks the way that it does. They're covering their own asses.
That she could not justify claiming more than about $1,800 a month for expenses on the townhouse, according to two people familiar with the discussions, who, like others interviewed for this story, spoke on the condition of anonymity to disclose private conversations. One source showed the Post a document laying out Mace's monthly expenses for the townhouse and calculating them as $1,726. Mace instructed her staff to seek the maximum reimbursement each day the house was in session, regardless of her actual expenses. Two former members of her staff and one other person familiar with the matter alleged to the Post. Mace denies that allegation. Mace denied wrongdoing and declined to explain her expenses in detail. Her office did not answer questions about maintenance and other costs related to the house she co-owns with her ex-fiancé. Mace owns 28% of the home, according to the deed, but did not answer questions about what percentage of the bills she paid. She did not claim any expenses for the fourth quarter of 2023.
Why should she have to claim expenses? I mean, obviously, again, you don't keep records. Nothing to worry about. Do whatever it is you want to do. Claim whatever you need to claim when it comes to getting reimbursed. It's legal. Why? Because they made it legal. Interesting.
But did not explain why. We follow all the rules for reimbursements, said Gabrielle Lipsky, a spokeswoman for Mace.
We follow all the rules for reimbursement, but let's just be reminded that there are no rules. Okay.
Who said the office found $300,000 in other savings last year, unrelated to the reimbursement program. Mace has been at war with a group of her former staffers for months. Her former chief of staff, Daniel Hanlon, took steps this year to run against her in a primary. He later bowed out. Mace's main opponent in a hotly contested June 11th primary is Catherine Templeton, a former South Carolina gubernatorial candidate who has accused Mace of flip-flopping for fame. Misusing taxpayer funds under the member's allowance could violate both House rules and federal law, said Kedrick Payne, former deputy chief counsel of the Office of Congressional Ethics, who now serves as the vice president of the Campaign Legal Center, a nonpartisan government watchdog group. Payne said that anyone who misuses the program could face corruption charges similar to those brought against Aaron Schock, a former congressman from Illinois, who used government and campaign funds to remodel his Capitol Hill office in the style of the TV show Downton Abbey.
Okay, well, let's stop right here. So, misusing taxpayer funds under the member allowance could violate House rules. What happens if you violate House rules? Well, it goes to like a credentials committee and they kind of review the process. But what are they going to see when they review the process here? Well, I mean, you have uh, a taxpayer funded member allowance program that lacks transparency, doesn't require that you keep receipts. And you can really kind of fudge what it looks like. It looks like you can fudge pretty much whatever it is that you want, but don't have it pay for your principal and interest. Well, you know what? There's probably a million and one ways to skirt this particular program, right? Interesting stuff. I mean, and here you got a guy who, okay, so he did get in trouble. I kind of remember the Aaron Schock thing, congressman from Illinois who redid his office to look like the TV show Downton Abbey. Okay, that's what they're doing with your money. I mean, this is insane. But let's continue.
The new travel reimbursement rules cover very specific expenses and have strict dollar limits, said Payne. Any member who violates these rules and submits false reimbursement claims can face civil and criminal penalties. The Office of Congressional Ethics frequently investigates members' blatant misuse of taxpayer dollars. Voters have a right to know that their elected officials aren't using public funds for personal expenses. The member reimbursement program has been popular, but any perception of unfair enrichment could endanger it. Congress is already one of the least trusted government institutions, and 81% of Americans believe.
And I wonder why. When you have these type of rules that lack transparency, lack receipts, strongly encouraged to keep records but not required to keep records, you wonder why Congress is the least least respected body of the three branches of government. And yet, we let them shape the picture. And the majority party in this particular case, well, I mean, I'm not surprised. Not surprised. See, and I try to hold Democrats responsible as well as Republicans. I mean, it may appear as if I cheerlead more for Democrats than I do Republicans, but I'm here to tell you right now, the far left is just as bad as the far right, in my opinion. Now, and somebody, give me your counter argument if you disagree, but I just think they're just as bad, personally. And that's probably a hasty generalization. However, I mean, again, I feel comfortable saying it, and I would feel comfortable revising and extending my remarks if I need to adjust. So, this program is ridiculous.
That members of Congress do a somewhat or very bad job at keeping their personal financial interests separate from their work in Congress, according to a September 2023 Pew Research poll. The bipartisan House Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress suggested the Member Reimbursement Account Program in 2022 as an alternative to raising members' salaries. Defenders of the program have argued that it matches benefits offered to lawmakers' counterparts in the private sector and executive branch and encourages diversity of representation. Members of Congress make $174,000 per year, which is about twice the median U.S. household income. But they must usually maintain two households, one in Washington, an expensive metro area, and another in their home districts. Many commute long distances at great expense. Some good government and anti corruption groups argue that higher lawmaker salaries would make public service more attractive to a wider array of Americans and discourage corruption.
I'm gonna tell you right now, don't pay these people any more money. Look, and here's the classic example. They haven't had a pay raise. They're about to tell you since 2009, but they found a way. They found a way to get themselves more money. So there's that.
But members of Congress have not given themselves a raise since 2009, as voting to do so is considered politically unpalatable. Some lawmakers have turned to living in their own offices to defray the costs. I wish members would give themselves a raise that they probably deserve, and then we'd all move on, said a staffer involved with congressional accounting, who spoke on the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss the program publicly. But they don't have the backbone to do that, so they gave members a
Staffers are not allowed or authorized to speak on this program publicly. Transparency in Washington, people, at its finest.
raise through this backdoor way that allows for abuse because there is no record keeping and there's no receipts. Leanne Caldwell and Alice Kreitz contributed to this report. This news
Okay,
story was written by Jacqueline Alamany.
folks, that's the story. And I sit here and just shake my head because this is the epitome of shameful. And yet you'll get the people all gassed up about sending money to Ukraine and sending money, not taking care of the people, not, homeless vets and everything else. But, these guys have homes in their districts and they're buying homes in Washington. Uh, I mean, I look, think about this for a second and I'll let you go. But just remember, they came to this job probably already established. Okay. So when they get elected to office, they get there and they're making a check about 175,000, double what the average or the median income is for the average American, right? And if you're in a Republican gerrymandered district, you should be paying attention to what I'm about to say because it's your districts that aren't living up to supply side economics themes. And I got to tell you, they got Fox News feeding you a steady diet of hate the other side, hate the other side, hate the other side. But when in reality, you really should be looking at your Republicans who gerrymandered these districts. But at the same time, not only do they have homes in their districts, they're buying homes in Washington and Virginia and other places around the surrounding area, right? Make the commute easier, right? And all on the taxpayer dime. I mean, really, if you're making if I'm making, let's say I got a salary at home of $120,000. All right. And then I go to Washington and make $174,000. Now, $120,000, when you look at expenses, right? Because I would tell you that even though the rich have more toys, when it comes to expenses each month, food only costs so much. Gas only costs so much. All of these numbers you can zero in on and say, you know what? That's not really a budget buster. Housing only costs so much, right? And so, for the most part, if you're making $120,000, that's just you. And let's say you got a spouse making money as well, then you're not struggling, right? You're actually, if you look at the stats, they'll tell you that they're putting more away than people in the middle, right? But you send them off to Washington, and I got to tell you, the salary to me just looks like a slush fund, the start of a slush fund, because this right here is definitely a slush fund. And boy, I tell you what, folks, I mean, this at the end of the day is just shameful. And yet, the people here are powerless to do anything about it, and they'll get away with it. So, see you the next story. Hey, folks, it's Art Shed. Make sure you like and subscribe. Leave your comments as well. So, like, leave your comments, and subscribe. Look forward to putting out more content daily.